So for the Leaving Cert for 2021, you only go up to 3 sharps. That's all they'll be examining. So 2 sharps is D major, 3 sharps is A major, and you just learn that off. 1 sharp is G major and no sharps is C major. And just to confirm that it's in a major key, we look here to bar 1 and we see what notes they used. So they used the notes D, C is probably a passing note, and they use the notes D. So that can be major. They're notes from chord 1. Right, so once you've confirmed the key, straight away in your rough work, you draw a chord box. So I'm going to draw a chord box here. So I'll start off with our scale D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. They're based on the 2 sharps in the key signature. So once I've written out my scale, I'll then write the notes that go in the chords, and I'm going to number my chord boxes. So chord 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 is major, 5 is major, 6 is minor, 7 we're not going to use for leaving cert, and back to 8. 8 is the same as 1, that's why I'm leaving it blank. Now I'm just going to write in the notes that go with those chords, D, F, A, and you can walk across D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, or you can jump in 3s, E, G, B, F, A, C. It's actually easier to walk across F, G, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F, G, A. Hopefully I did my chord box right. It's very important that you do your chord box right, because then everything will be wrong. If your chord box is wrong, everything is wrong. So take your time doing that. So rub out chord 3 and chord 7. We do not use them, okay? Right, my chord box is done. Now I'm going to start my composition. Oh yeah, also, we need to take one of these instruments here. So the instruments that they have there are listed. Now I've told you before that a flute or a clarinet or a violin are good instruments to pick. The reason a violin is good is that it can go up to very high notes and it can go very low. So you've very few limitations. The flute is there, it's an option. However, if you're picking flute, be aware that the lowest note that a flute can do is down here, a low D, and that's not that low, okay? So the lowest note for a flute, So be aware of that when you pick the flute. Don't go any lower than a low note. However, you see, if the violin was an option, the lowest note that we can do for a violin is way down there. It's a low G, all right? So that's why you have less limitations. So if the violin is an option, please pick the violin, okay? So then you won't lose marks for going below low D, you see, for the flute. Clarinet is also a good option as there's a wide range. However, the flute is here, so we'll pick the flute. So when you're doing your melody today, do not go below low D. That's it. Do not go below low D, okay? Now, let's get started. So, chord box drawn, and now let's write out our layout. So it says here, include a modulation to the dominant at a suitable point. So we've chosen our suitable point as bar 7 and 8. That's where we do our modulation. And our modulation to the dominant is where you go to a new key. So if you have a highlighter or something like that, maybe highlight it or do it in a different colour when you're writing in your layout, because you're in a different key and you're using chord 5 to 1 in a different key. I'm just trying to see, do I have a different colour pen? Alright, we'll just do it in this colour. So you're doing a perfect cadence 5 to 1, but you're in a new key, alright? And what new key are you in? We always modulate to the dominant because that's what it asks us. And dominant means 5. That's what dominant means. It means the 5th. So modulate to the 5th degree of the scale. So our new key, modulate means change to a new key. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Our new key there, that's our new key, A major, okay? So modulation to A major. So you just count up 5 for your modulation, and they're the keys you're going to use. So you could draw out your new chord box there for A major. So chord 1 now in A major is going to be A. So it's going to be A, C, and E. And then draw your chord box along. 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm only going to go up with chord 5 because that's all we're going to be using. And I see their chord, oh sorry, I'm not writing it in the camera. Sorry, so I'm drawing my new chord box for A major. So I just went up with chord 5 because I know that's as far as I'm going. So it's E, G, and B are chord 5, and that's what I need to know. So I need to know chord 5 is E, G, and B. And I'm using chord 1, which is A, C, and E. Now that's in a new key, and you're only using it in bar 7 and 8. So highlight bar 7 and 8 if that's what you need to do, that you're using notes from the new key there, okay? So whatever helps you. Now, then before that, for bars 5 and 6, you're developing it from bars 1. So develop bar 1 and 2. So develop bar 1 and 2. So check what chords they use. So they used chord 1 here because they have the notes D, D, C is probably a passing note. Here they're using F, D, and B. And what chord is F, D, and B in it? So we look through here, and that's chord 6. Chord 6 is F, D and B in it. So they're using chord 6. So I'm going to use notes from chord 6 here, and I'm going to use notes from chord 1. And I can use a similar rhythm. Now down here then, again, here we have a plan and we do a sequence. And you base your sequence on something interesting that comes up here. So it could be a dotted rhythm they use there. It could be this dotted rhythm that they use here, 3. Sequence based on bar 3. Now, if nothing interesting is happening in bar 3, if there's no dotted rhythm or there's nothing interesting happening in bar 3, don't base it on bar 3. Base it on it. You can base it on bar 2 or bar 4. 3. If you're confused, just base it on bar 3. So that means you can do a development of bar 3 here, and then you do a sequence of it there. So if I develop bar 3, they're using, let's find out what chord they're using. So they have the notes G, F, E, D. So G, F, E, D. Maybe F is a passing note, so we're looking for, and maybe D is a passing note because they're quavers and because they're walking. So I'm looking for a chord now that has G and E. So that could be chord 2, could be chord 5, 7 as well, but we'll go with chord 2. So they used chord 2, so we're going to use a range of chord 2. So I'm going to stick with the exact same rhythm they have, and this time what I'm going to do is just start on E instead. So I'm going to use the same rhythm, so that's quaver, quaver, dotted crotchet, quaver. And I'm going to start on E. And this time I'm actually going to walk up instead of walking down. E, F, G. So E, F, G. And I'm going to go... Oh, I did the wrong rhythm. Sorry about that. So it should be E, F, quaver, quaver. G is a dotted crotchet. And then A is a quaver. Sorry. Okay. So I did E, F, G, A. And then I'm going to do a sequence of that. So sequence means walking up one step. So now I'm going to go, you can walk up a step or you can walk down a step. So I might actually walk down. So we'll walk down a step. The reason I'm walking down a step is that we just used chord 2 there. And chord 2, if we were to walk up a step, would be using notes from chord 3. And I don't want to use chord 3. So I'm going to walk down a step instead. That means I'll be using notes from D, F and A. So I just started on E there. So this time I'm going to start on D. F walks down to E. G walks down to A, walks down to G, and using the same rhythm as there, which is quaver, quaver, dotted crotchet, quaver. Alright, so quaver, quaver, so D, E, F is a dotted crotchet, and then another note up is a quaver. Alright, so that's our sequence. Now here then you're going to do an imperfect cadence. So you want to use any chord going to 5, which is an imperfect cadence. And we learned that after doing our backing chords, any chord going to 5. So long notes are a good idea at the end of a phrase. They use quaver, quaver, crotchet, rest. So that's a nice pattern there. We could be copying that. So I'm going to copy that. So that's a quaver rest, which is worth a half. And this is a crotchet and a quaver, quaver. And I want to use notes from chord 5, so A, C and E. So I'll start with A. I'll jump to C, quaver, quaver, and I'll do an E crotchet. So same rhythm. Now here then, you're developing again bar 1 and 2. So develop bar 1 and 2. Develop bar 2. So development of bar 2. So again, they use chords 1 and 6. So we can use chord 1 and we can use chord 6. But we're going to change it slightly. So we'll get back to that in a second. Here then, you have to use chord 5 to 1. You want to have a perfect cadence. And you have to finish on a long do. So our do, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So our do is this note here, whatever our first chord is. That's our do. So a long D. And we'll finish with a low D. Now that's the lowest. Actually, on a flute, a low D is hard to play. Now it would be correct, you wouldn't lose marks for it, but I'm going to use actually a high D. It would be nicer sound on the flute. So that's a minimum, and I'm going to, I was saying you could tie a quaver rest, but I might actually just do a quaver rest because they did a quaver rest up there. So you're finishing on a high D, and that shows a perfect cadence. Now I have to use notes from chord 5, A, C and E. They use a mix of quavers, crotchets, so I can use a mix of quavers, crotchets. So I'm going to start with a dotted crotchet on A because I'm using notes from chord 5. So a high A, dotted crotchet. If you don't know your ledger lines, these lines that go above, you need to learn them, okay? So dotted crotchet A, I'm going to walk down to G, which is a passing note. Then I'm going to do an F crotchet. And that's my 3 beats in a bar. So that's A, C and E. Now, what did I do? Sorry, I did A. Oh yeah. So I'm actually going to add in another quaver because I want to have notes from the chord. So A, C and E. So I've done A, which is part of the chord. G is a passing note. I've done F, a passing note, and E is part of the chord. So that's my chord 5. And that has 3 beats in the bar. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, make sure you always have 3 beats in a bar. Except for this one only has 2.5 because the other half is up here in the upbeat. Right, we only have a little bit left to do. Here, any chord you're allowed to use. So I just used chord 2 here and I used chord 1 there. So the options I've left are 4, 5, or, well, I can't use 5 because you can't have 2 chords in succession. So the options I have are 4 or 6. So I'll go with the major chord and I'm going to use chord 4. So notes from chord 4 are G, B, D. So I just used a G there. So I'm going to jump up to B. So this is a B. High notes on the flute are nice. So I'm going to start with a B crotchet. And then I can jump then to a G. You're allowed to jump, remember, when you're using notes of the chords that you've chosen. So B, jumping to G, and then I'll do some quaver movement. So let me see, I might jump down to D, C. Yeah, so D is part of the chord. So I used F, G, A, B. I used B, G, and D there, and then D, C is a passing note, and that's fine. Okay, right, finally, we're on back to the first phrase here. So develop bars 1. So bars 1 is there. I'm going to use something really similar to bar 1 because you're developing it, remember? So I'll use the D crotchet. I'll use C. Actually, I'll just put in a quaver movement maybe. D, C. Remember, these are notes from chord 1. D, C. I'll go back to D again. D, E, quaver movement. And then I'll do a long crotchet F. So how it's based on bar 1 is that I used a D here like they did. I just added in a passing quaver note. I went back to D because they repeated their D. I just switched it around a bit. So you just switch around bar 1. But it will be correct if you're using notes from chord 1. Okay, if you're using notes from chord 1, it will be correct. Right, notes from chord 6. So that's B, D and F. So B, D and F. Let me see now. So I could just do this backwards. So I could jump down to B. Now I'm just thinking it might be too big a jump to go down to low B. So I'm going to use high B. This is high B up here. So I'm going to use crotchet. Actually, I'll do a dotted crotchet, same rhythm as they have. And then I'll jump down to F, quaver. And then another note is D is in our chord 6. Okay, I'll stop it there for now.